only going to talk to you about the ones that are clinically relevant. There's a lot of really great organisms out there. I'm not going to talk about them. I'm only going to talk about the ones that can cause infections. And here are the 6 different groups, right? And these groups are all based on, they're all classified by movement, okay? So for instance, if you look at these organisms, then the archaeozoa are the ancient protozoans. These are transitional organisms between the bacteria and the eukaryotes. Now, the archaeozoa do not have mitochondria, although they have a nucleus. So they're eukaryotic, but no mitochondria, so their electron transport system is in their plasma membrane, much like bacteria are, and that's why they're a transitional organism, right? So they have flagella, but no mitochondria, so their electron transport system is in their plasma membrane. The euglenozoa also have flagella, but they're more evolved. They have mitochondria, and so their electron transport system is located in the mitochondria, okay? So the first 2 move by flagella, then the amoebozoa move by pseudopoda. What's a pseudopod? What's a pseudopod?
1 foot or something?
A false foot,
Like,
yeah.
false foot, yeah.
So Isabella, what is that? That looks like a mummy.
They like to move
Oh,
like
okay, yeah.
that.
So they move part of their somatic structure, and then the rest of the cell follows. Yes, they're like the Halloween bug. Because they're like chasing things and trying to catch them, right? Silopha are easy. They move by cilia. The apicomplexa are the bad boys of the group, right? They don't have any way to move. They are non-modal, but they hang out in aqueous solutions, and the cells moving very fast hit into them, and they get right into them by this apical complex that just goes right into them, and then they infect the cells.
Like a spear.
Like a spear. I like to call it a battering ram. These are the bad boys of the group. This is malaria, this is toxoplasma, it's babesia, it is cryptosporidium. There's a bunch of bad boys in the group, okay? And then there's one group of organisms down there at the bottom. You can see the Dianophyta. I said they're algae, they're not a parasite. I don't have anywhere else to talk about these things, but they're so important clinically that I have to talk about them. So I put them here, and they're single-celled organisms. They have a nucleus. They fall into the protozoa, but they're not a parasite. These organisms produce toxins, and the toxins get into the environment. And for instance, if you like raw oysters, they can biomagnify in raw oysters, and then you can come down with paralytic shellfish poisoning, which is not good. Okay? Very, very bad toxin. Did you know that the first zombies couldn't run and they couldn't communicate like they do now? And they were not really initiated by a viral infection? The first zombies.
I'm screaming so hard.
I'll take that.
I just breathed all over
Are you
myself.
sick?
No.
Well, then I'll.
And you're not a germaphobe.
Okay. So, the first zombies were actually made by practitioners of voodoo. And what they would do is they would inject a small amount of either zaxatoxin that comes from these organisms, or tetrodotoxin that comes from the fugu fish, and that would put them in a stasis. And they could be in stasis for a long, long time. They're not necessarily dead, but not really able to do anything else, right? And so those were the first zombies. And then you had the Night of the Living Dead, where the zombies moved, but they would never, I mean, as long as you could run, Tram, they're never gonna catch you, right? And nowadays, the zombies are caused by an infection of a virus, and those things can run and they can communicate with each other. They've made zombies uncool, right? Because now you can't get away from them. Right? So it's pretty cool to think about how all that lore, all of that zombie lore, Eric, is rooted.
Or mess this morning.
Is rooted in microbiology. So for those of you doing your assignment, you might think about talking about zombies. Be fun. So we're going to talk about those a little bit. The metazoans are the larger organisms, They are multicellular, and there are three different groups, and they're classified by the three S's. Sex, that means not necessarily do they have sex, they have sex. But it means, are they an organism that has both the male and the female sex organs in them? We call those organisms monacious. Or do they have a male and a female gender? And in that case, we call them dioecious. Okay? So there are three different groups of organisms here. The trematoda are the flukes, they're flat, right? The cestoda or the tapeworms are also flat, and hence they're called platyhelminths or platyhelminthic. They're the flat worms, not true worms. They are not real worms. The nematoda are the roundworms, and those are the only real worm. Now, we as humans, anything that's squiggly and long, we just call it a worm. Are you with me? It's a worm. No, it's not a worm, but it's hard to tell somebody it's not a worm when it looks like a worm to them. Yeah, good. All right, now the last group, the exoparasites. Remember, the definition of parasite is the organism must live with you or in you. Yep. So in that case, the exoparasites to me are more of a nuisance. Yes, you can have a tick on you. Yes, you can have lice on you. But to me, they're more important as vectors of other infectious agents, right? You can get bit by tick and then maybe get Lyme disease. You can get bit by a flea and maybe get plague, right? So there's different organisms that are associated with these organisms. The exoparasites are classified by a lot of different ways, but the easiest way is just to look at the number of legs. And so the number of legs for the insects are 6 legs. And the examples of them would be fleas, bed bugs, keds, lice. Yep. And then for the arachnida, they have 8 legs. Yeah, they're related to a spider and a scorpion. But spiders and scorpions are not parasitic. What we're mostly interested in are ticks and mites. Okay? And both of those can be parasites. Sir?
The insects, you said fleas, bed bugs, lice, and
Keds. K-E-D-S. Those small sucking, blood sucking insects. Okay? Good? Anybody got questions? All right. Now you've been introduced to them. Now it's time to talk about it. So today, my goal is to get through the protozoans. If we don't, we'll just start there next week. Okay? So remember, the definition of a parasite is that it is an organism that has to live with or on the host. Yeah? And so if you look at the organisms that I have on the slide here, this is a ciliate, and you can see how it's acting, right? It's got cilia all over it. It's pretty cool. What is this? Isabella? Pseudopoda, and that's an amoeba. Okay? And then this is the malaria parasite coming out of red blood cells. This is a very famous image that was published in National Geographic. And so it's very beautiful, showing the organisms coming out of these cells and stuff. Okay? So let's talk about them. There are 3 different groups, right? Protozoans, the metazoans, and the exoparasites. And so this is an example of a protozoan, single-celled organisms, 1 single nucleus. These are metazoans. This happens to be a roundworm called Ascaris I'm sorry, called Nicator americanus. It's a hookworm. And it's got things that look like teeth. They're not exactly like our teeth, but they act like our teeth. They used to chomp and they used to hold on to things. And then you can see our friend, the little tick. Right? This is the Lone Star tick, Amblyoma texani. It is the Lone Star tick. It's found ubiquitously all over Texas and other states also. But it gets the name because it was first characterized by somebody in Texas. Okay? And so if we think about them for a minute, right, the definition of parasitology, or the study of parasitology, looks at parasites and is interested in how they're distributed in populations and the problems they cause to us as humans, but not only as they infect us, but also how they infect other things that we care about, right? And so those are mostly going to be other animals like livestock or dogs or cats or whatever, right? So they are notorious to be parasites of things like raccoons and possums. Very big, they're heavily parasitized animals because they eat just about everything, are you with me? And therefore they pick up all kinds of different things, okay? So the host itself is kind of the house of the parasite. It's where the parasite lives, and it's what the parasite is taking nutrients from. Because remember, parasitology or parasitism is a symbiotic relationship between two organisms. And remember, all symbiotic relationships center around nutrients. So here your parasite is taking nutrients at the expense of the host. So the host is the nutrient. The perfect parasite will never kill a host. It'll just simply take nutrients from it forever. There is no perfect parasite. The closest perfect parasite is a tapeworm. But eventually you get so many tapeworms that you develop anemia and all kinds of different things. You're just not getting enough nutrients. The other one that's kind of close is a pinworm, right? How many people have had pinworms? Raise your hand. None of you have had pinworms. Oh, have you ever seen little kids kind of scratching their bahankas? They have pinworms.
My son had it.
Yeah, very common. And if one person has it in the family, everybody has it.
What is it?
No.
Like, that's not true. We all got checked.
Oh, you all have them,
We
but
got checked.
did you
I got checked. I had to poop in a thing.
did you take the medication?
No,
You didn't take any medication?
I was pregnant. She was weird about it, so she freaked me out. And I didn't want to take it, but she checked my food.
Well, if you had to have a parasite, Miss Samantha, the pinworm would be the one to have, because it doesn't really cause a problem, except it causes itchy bum, or in some cases it causes a prolapsed rectum. What is a prolapsed rectum, Ellie?
Where it comes out, right?
Usually Isabella's like making fun of me already. Usually the anus is an innie, yeah.
Sphincter.
And then what happens, it becomes an outie, yes? Because it's so inflamed from the mucilage, the mucus, and the different molecules that the pinworm secretes when it comes in and out of your anus.
How do you get pinworms? Are they just like food or how do you shake?
Oh, no, don't do it.
It's just, they're ubiquitous, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
Right now in Austin, Texas, we have two big problems. Actually, three. We have bed bug problems, mostly in northeast Austin. We have lice problems in a bunch of different little schools. And we have pinworm problems right now going on in central Austin. Can't get away from
Yeah.
I think life has become a really big
it.
problem.
Lice has become a
Because
big
they
problem.
don't send kids home anymore. They don't allow them.
Because in my day, if you had lice, they would just come and say, Taylor, come here. And you'd go there, so come with me. And you'd go to the principal's office and like, what happened to Taylor? Oh my God. And then you would watch her leave, her mom taking her, picking her up, and they're like, she's got lice. And we didn't say that. She said,
They still
we
did
would
that
say,
when I was in school.
she has piojos. Right? Piojos is Spanish for cooties.
They still did that when I was in like
No, they
middle
don't anymore,
school.
because
I know.
it affects the mental state of the student.
They should allow
they give it to the whole class though.
And the kids just go
Potentially.
back to school the next day.
It's everywhere at Cunningham right now.
And a lot of people can't afford the
Don't say any names like out loud, or we don't get in trouble, but it's a lot of places.
A lot of people can't afford the treatment, so they just.
It's pretty cheap. It's like $9.
Maybe it's weird, but my mom used mayonnaise. It would smother them.
I've never heard of that.
It was a big issue, for like a couple of months in the school I went to middle school in, and she swore by it. They would use it like in, she was in a pediatric office.
Delicious.
And that's what they did, and it was cheap and it worked.
My sister got them when she was in 2nd grade. And I came home from school one day and my mom had shampoo in her hair and was,
In
and,
the middle of the.
and they were like rinsing it off, and I looked at it and said, "What are y'all doing?" She goes, "Well, your sister has lice. Can you help me get in here and help me pull them out of there?" I'm like, "Okay." So we had a special little comb and we were combing them out. And she said, "We have to get the eggs out too, the nits, you know." So we were looking around. My brother came in the door. My brother is squeamish. He came in the door. He said, "What are y'all doing?" And I knew that he was going to have a problem. So what I did was I opened my hand like this, and I had like 3 little lice crawling around in it. And he went, fainted. And he moved out of the house for 3 months. Went to live with my aunt.
Oh my.
And they're freaky. We had some family staying with us. It was my husband's cousin, and then her 3 young kids, just a tough time. And they were staying with us, and they were going to public school. And little did I know that the mom was using my hairbrush on her in the bathroom. And so it went around like our whole house. It was before my daughter was born, thank God. But my mother-in-law used to be a hairstylist, and so she worked with all of us. And then she wouldn't pick out the eggs until
just
she
come
would dry
in.
her hair,
Yeah.
and then she would straighten it.
Just come back.
And you could hear them pop, like the eggs pop, and that's what she would do. She would just straighten your hair and it would kill them, and then she would get them out.
We'll talk more about pinworms in a little bit. Right? Maybe not today, but it's coming. Okay? So if we think about the protists, right, they're all chemoheterotrophs, they're all single cell. They're absorptive for the most part. Some of them can engulf, so we say that they have ingestive abilities, right? They are motile for the most part, at least the ones that I'm gonna talk about. Most of them are motile, except one group, the apicomyplexa, they're not. All of them form cysts, except one that I'll talk about that didn't form a cyst. So we need to talk about what a cyst is and what a trophozoite is, right? So if we think about this, the cyst is a dormant, refractive, protective state of the protozoan. It is like an endospore, except not as protective as an endospore. The cyst is used by the protozoan to get into our body. 99% of all the protozoal parasites are through the fecal-oral route. What does that mean, Clarissa? 99% of all the protozoal parasites are through the fecal-oral route. What does that mean? So it's in your digestive tract the whole time. If you eat something and you have the cyst that get into your stomach, a lot of them rely on the stomach acid to make the cyst more friable. What does that mean? Friable, Jessica? You like it when I use these nice big words. What is that, friable?
Like,
Can break apart easy.
Yeah.
So once they're in the stomach, they're more friable. They move into the small intestines, right? And they break apart. And then the trophozoite starts growing. The trophozoite is what causes the infection. The cyst is how it gets into the body. Okay? The trophozoite is the active, free-swimming state of the protozoan. Okay, now I say free-swimming because for the most part, most of them are motile, except one group is not. Okay? Good? Yep.
So is the white one the cyst in this?
So
picture?
this is the cyst.
Yeah, the trophozoite's the longer one.
The little pink dudes. Okay? So at some point, Eric, some of those trophozoites will actually form a cyst again and then be released into the environment.
That's
Okay?
what you see there at the end.
Huh?
That's what you see there at the end,
Mhm.
is it's making
Yeah, the end of the large intestines, right? Good, out the anus. And so that's how it happens the whole time. A lot of these organisms that are parasites have developed very complicated life cycles. Why do you think that is, Christy? Huh?
Live longer.
What do you mean live longer? Is it like
Survive
live long
longer
and prosper?
outside.
Like that kind of live longer?
Well, they want to survive longer outside of a host.
It's hard to destroy them if they have a real complicated life cycle, right? Because if you take out a few of them, there's still others still in the other parts of the life cycle, and all they have to do is fill in the gap. Yeah.
Is that why they tell you, like, when you have young kids, not to let them, like, run around or playing with dirt, because they can get.
I've never heard
That's-
that.
I've been told before, like.
I've never heard that, but what I have heard is back in the day when some of my family members were ranchers, we were not allowed to go barefoot out in where the cattle were, because there's an organism that pierces the soft tissues of the toes and can get into your body that way. That's a hookworm. We'll talk about him later. Okay. Yes, did you have a question, Jinjin? Did you have a question? Sam?
Me. So I just wanted to make sure I understood the first part is the cyst and enters the digestive tract when it comes more.
Enters the mouth first,
Mouth.
then stomach.
And then that's whenever the capsule's broken.
No, not yet. Stomach makes it weak, goes to small intestines, then it breaks apart. It's not a capsule, it's a cyst.
The cyst.
Okay.
Okay.
And then the trophozoites cause a problem
And the large intestine.
in the small and large intestines.
Okay. And then it's ready to enter back into the environment sometimes, and it can reform a cyst in. Okay.
And then
that
the
is
cyst can
affecting
sometimes, Samantha, hold multiple nuclei. You see how that one's representing 4 nuclei? That means that there are 4 different organisms in that cyst. Okay? Sir?
Wouldn't we just assume that like all our domesticated pets and livestock and everything else have all sorts of worms? And
That's a good
protozoans
assumption to make.
in their gut, and then they.
That's a good assumption to make.
Yeah.
The two most, and so I don't know, I mean, my wife's family's got a ranch up in Bell County, and every once in a while we get called to help work cattle. I'm always the vaccination and the deworming guy, because I'm a microbiologist. You're gonna do the vaccinations and the deworming. Okay, fine. And so, you know, what I do is I give the vaccines, whatever the vaccines are at that point. Then I go in there and I have a little tube and I squeeze a tube in the mouth that's anti-worm. And then I lay some ivermectin on top to get rid of the flies and the ticks and whatever, right? So that's my job. So like if I'm slow, they all look at me like you're holding up progress, right? So like, you know, and that's all I do, right? And so then after about 3 hours of that, I'm tired.
Yeah, very
I need a hamburger, right? So yeah. But, and they all, when I say that, because they're all ranchers, when I need a hamburger, they're all like, they clap for me because, you know, they think I'm some hoity-toity progressive guy that doesn't really like anything, you know, whatever. Yep.
Yeah, so pretty much if we have pets or if we eat fresh produce, we can expose this all the time anyway.
You get exposed all the time. That's, you know, that's why I say, you know, most of us live our lives with microorganisms the whole time.
More
You
of
just
a
don't know that.
universal, like you just go ahead and treat it even if it's not there. I know we do that for our animals, like heartworms and stuff.
Yeah,
because we
and
have
so,
much stagnant water.
especially in Texas, for dogs, you should be treating them for heartworms on a monthly basis. Because that's the one parasite that can really cause a lot of damage to the dogs.
Really hard to get rid of too, right? Like once they get it, it's like
You
almost.
can't
And
really,
it's almost, even if you get rid of them, the damage to the heart is
It's
pretty
already
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the story of my Peppy when we get into disease mechanisms later on and how he died. And he died because of damage to his heart through heartworms. We got him when he was infected already. He adopted us and then we treated him. Holistically, we came up with our own process. Got rid of them, but that damage everything. We'll talk about them later. Okay, so here are the different groups. You know, I've already talked about them, so let's just go on and talk about the groups. So the Archaeozoa, remember, they are the organisms that, and I want you to notice, I haven't said much, but it looks like we're in the last 25 minutes of class already. Can you believe that? It's just gone, it's just flown. It's amazing. But if we think about this for a minute, the Archaeozoa, if you think about them, they're a transitional organism. They don't have mitochondria, so their electron transport system is in the plasma membrane, but they have flagella. Right? And so here are two representative organisms. This is Trichomonas, which Trichomonas is thought to be a very common infectious agent that's sexually transmitted. I would disagree with that, but there's a lot of papers out there written by people who work on Trichomonas, that's all they do, and they want to say that there's a lot of Trichomonas in the United States. I think there's more chlamydia, more gonorrhea than there is Trichomonas.
What's the
I
big
know
difference?
that because I volunteered at a clinic for people. It was a free clinic, they could come in for anything. I wanted to work with diabetic patients. They found out I was a microbiologist, and I quickly became check this person out for a sexually transmitted infection. I saw so many cases of gonorrhea, chlamydia, I got burned out.
What is?
One case of trichomonas, yep.
What is trichomonas?
Trichomonas is a small little protozoan, and when it gets into our bodies, it's the one organism, Tay, that doesn't have a cyst. Now, why do they have a cyst? To get into the body. Well, Trichomonas goes from one happy place to another. It goes from the vagina to the penis, or from the penis to the vagina, and it doesn't need any protection, so it only has a trophozoitic state. But when it is in a woman, a lot of times the discharge is very frothy because it's an anaerobic organism. It's purulent, it's got pus in it. And so, if women see that happening, it's not gonna be a normal kind of thing, right? You're gonna go get it checked out, and then you get diagnosed. And it's easy to treat. Metronidazole will knock it out just like that. Right?
Is it similar to gonorrhea?
No. Gonorrhea, a lot of times with gonorrhea, you'll have the exudate, it's the exudate itself has a lot of it. This one is much more gas,
Yeah.
much more gas.
Okay.
Okay? Good? So, this is Giardia. Those two things right there, Isabella, what are those two things right there? These things right here.
Oh, look here.
They are sucking disc. And so the way they work is, if this is the small intestines, Giardia comes in and it puts its sucking disc on and it holds on that way, and then it takes all the nutrients at once. Yes? So, here is a guy that looks just like me, doing exactly what I would do. We're hiking out in the woods, I get thirsty, I'll go over to the river or whatever, and I think it's clean, I'll just drink out of it, right? Except if I see that little guy right there, the beaver, I will not drink out of the water, because the beaver is known as a very important reservoir for Giardia. This is the organism where I think I told you when I first moved to Oak Hill, I found out there was a well, I uncapped the well, I took some water out, I tested it for bacterial pathogens, it didn't have any, I drank the water, and I came down with giardiasis. Right. It was bad. As bad as dysentery can get from Giardia. Yes,
I know people, I've never done it, I don't honestly have much knowledge about it, but people put like iodine in water.
so
Does
iodine in
that
water
help?
typically is for thyroid problems.
But I mean like when
Iodine
they're
tablets?
out, like when they're in hiking
Oh,
or
oh,
something.
yeah,
to
okay.
clean it.
To
Would that-
sanitize the.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
because it's a
sorry.
halogen.
So
You
it
can
would
use-
kill this, or
Yes,
inhibit it.
yes, it's a sanitizing process. Iodine, bleach is the other one, chlorine tablets are another one. And then other people, like I have a little UV light that I
Mhm.
carry in my pocket, and I just stick it in my cup and let it sit there. Or the last thing is, that there's I didn't bring it in. There's a straw that you can use, and the
Oh,
straw
yeah,
has
that's,
a 0.22 micron,
yeah.
and you can, and you
Mhm.
do, everything you suck
The
up
life
is,
straw or
that's what it's called. I have two at home, I just forget to bring them in, I'll bring them.
We have them too, our water's.
It's amazing what can happen when you have those things in
I
house.
remember when those came out, it was like a really big thing.
Well, yeah, and, I think they came out of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They were just giving away to people.
They did for a long time, they don't anymore.
And then from that came like kind of like hold up your, so there's a container like this, and you fill it up 3/4 of the way, and then you put the lid on, and you turn it upside down. And when you drink out of it, the water that is on the side that you drink has been filtered, because there's a filter membrane in there. And so that works really great also.
The Brita.
Huh?
Is it Clean Canteen?
I don't know what it's called, but I mean, there's several different
Mhm.
prototypes of it.
Is that similar to what those Brita filters?
No,
or
well,
whatever
the
do?
Brita only work to filter out organics, so,
So it wouldn't work against.
okay, so it's all good stuff, right? During the pandemic, there was so many new inventions that occurred because people were just thinking about how they could make lives better.
People didn't put anything.
Yeah. And so they were sitting at home thinking, how can I make life, and they came up with all kinds of cool ways, cool things to do, right? It's amazing. So this is trichomonas. This is what it looks like when it's stained. And so you can see it has this little sharp little thing called an axle style. The axle style is how it penetrates the tissues it's infecting. So a lot of times with women, if they have signs of trichomoniasis, the person doing the examination can look into the vagina, and around the cervix there'll be all these little blemishes where the axle style, and we call that strawberry cervix. If you have a computer in front of you, you can look up strawberry cervix and you can see what I'm talking about. And that's an indication that the person's infected with trichomonas. Now, the other way to do it is just to take some of the exudate and give it to me or somebody like me, and we can look it up and see if we find the trichomonad, because they're pretty easy to spot once you look under a microscope.
Since it gets so close to the cervix, does it cause any conflict with fertility?
It can, so all of these organisms that can cause sexually transmitted infections can go up the reproductive system and eventually lead to saprophytitis, infection of the fallopians. It can cause ovarian disease, which then can all constrict the release of the ova. With men, it can do the same thing, but it destroys the vase and different parts of the testes, and therefore low sperm count. And so there's all kinds of things that can happen. So we want to be sure that we get these things treated pretty quickly.
As long as they're treated like.
What are you looking
Is
at?
this it? I'm kidding.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. That's not what it looks like, okay? All right, let's talk about the euglenozoa. The euglenozoa are flagellated also, except they have mitochondria. They're more highly evolved, if you will. And some of these organisms are bad boys, right? So the two that I want to talk about are the hemoflagellates. What does that mean, Samantha? Hemoflagellates.
It means that they like blood.
They're in the blood. Very good. So here you can see, here's one of them right here. This is what they look like. The organism I'm going to be talking about are trypanosomes. And anytime you see an SPP like this, that means there's more than one species, right? So if we think about the trypanosomes, the two most important ones are Trypanosoma brucei gambians, and you can use either one of those terms, Trypanosoma brucei or Trypanosoma gambians, and this is the etiology of African sleeping sickness. Okay? So African sleeping sickness. Ever heard of it?
No.
African sleeping sickness, you get bite by a tsetse fly, yeah, you get bite by a tsetse fly, that's what it looks like. And the trypanosome gets put into your body. It becomes neuropathic. What does that mean?
It goes to your brain.
Goes to and shuts down the nervous system. Now this takes some time. But eventually what happens is the autonomic nervous system shuts down. And when that shuts down, you stop breathing and you pass away. And so it looks like you pass away in your sleep. That's how it got its name. It's not always that easy, right? These things can cause terrible, terrible deaths. But it gets the name African sleeping sickness for that reason. One of my friends in undergraduate school when we were studying, he just called it ASS, African sleeping sickness, ASS. Good?
So do these, did you say all protozoans, none of them have mitochondria?
No, just the archaeozoa.
Just the
Don't or do?
Just the archaeozoa are the only ones that do not have milk. All the other ones have. Now these are different because these are in the blood, right? And I just told you that most of the 99% of all the protozoans that are parasitic are fecal oral. Well, here's some that are not. Right? The second one is the one that we are going to be worried about, and this is Chagas disease. And so Chagas disease is typically found with us, it's found in the Regeviid bug, right? How many people have ever heard of the Regeviid bug?
The kissing bug?
The kissing bug, same thing, right? Just more scientific as Regeviid. The Regeviid, get this, Jen, are you ready? The Regeviid, when you are asleep, it lands on a very vascular part of your body, and so that's mostly going to be your lips. It takes a blood meal, it pierces the skin, takes a blood meal, and to add insult to injury, it poops. And when it poops, the organism moves out of the poop and gets into the bloodstream through the bite it just made. And then over a period of time, you develop cardiomyopathy or digestive problems because of the inflammation that the organism causes once it gets into your body. We have had cases of Chagas disease in Texas, but mostly in dogs. It kills them. So my friend called me over one time and said, I know you know a lot about these things, can you come and see my dog? And I went, and so the poor dog was on the back porch, it was just laying there. I picked it up and moved it a little bit, and underneath him was about 20, 25 Regeviid bugs that had been feeding on him. And I looked at my friend and I said, why didn't you take this animal to the vet? And he looked at me, I didn't think he was that sick. And so I looked at it a little bit more, and then I took the dog to the vet. Evidently, this kid, this dude, this friend, was not gonna do that. And I told him, you should never own another pet, ever. Because this dog died because he had Chagas disease. And there was nothing they could do for him.
We have a lot of those bugs in the house, and they're terrifying.
They're everywhere. I mean, a lot of times they can't find a blood meal, so they will suck off plants and take nectar and other things as another source.
A lot of times
But
they
this
go
is
right-
gonna be a big problem in Texas. We're not talking about it. There used to be an article about it right out here. I don't know if it's still there. But we're not talking about Chagas disease. Why? Because it's not important to us unless it's affecting the population. Right? But we're not talking about it. Just like we're not talking about prions. And this could be a big problem. Your practice, you will see this. Right? Good. It causes Bell's palsy. What's Bell's palsy?
Where you're
Half of your face
almost like a stroke.
temporarily paralyzed. So Bell's palsy, there can be lots of causes of Bell's palsy, right? You could have a mild stroke. You could have MS. I mean, there's just all kinds of different things that can happen, right? So if you see somebody whose part of their face looks like it's not working properly, you can't assume what happened. They have to be worked up. They have to be looked at to see what could be the etiology. Right? It's important.
Blood work would show this one because.
If we were looking for it, right? If we did blood work, and we just did blood work, we did a chem profile. It's not going to show up that way. But if we know that we're looking for Chagas disease, we can look for the antibodies, and it would show it pretty quickly. If we're doing true blood work, we're looking at eosinophils or neutrophils or whatever, we might see an elevated amount of the eosinophils. Okay. Good? So you can see how clinically relevant this is, right? And you guys are going to be dealing with this in your practice. Very complicated life cycle. I don't expect you to know any of the life cycles except malaria, okay? Because it's a really good one. There's 38 steps. You're not going to have to know 38 steps. I will shrink it down significantly. Okay? Does it?
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. Let's go on and talk about the amoebozoa. The amoebozoa moved by pseudopoda. There's a whole bunch of them, but most of them are not pathogenic. One of them, Entamoeba histolytica, is pathogenic. It causes amoebic dysentery. This is the one I can remember being in college, and my friends will all say, let's go down to Mexico, and we would go down there. And then they would say, well, don't drink the water because you're gonna get a parasite. And so I'm like, really? Because they didn't know anything. I mean, they were, not science majors. And then they would drink frozen margarita. And I would tell them, I said,
That's ice.
when you drink frozen margarita, what are you drinking? And they would say, well, alcohol. I'm like, what else? Ice. And so I said, where's ice come from? Water. And I said, you told me not to drink the water. And they would say stupid things like, but the alcohol will kill the parasite. Because it's an cyst. And the cyst gets into the body. And the cyst breaks apart. And then you get amoebic dysentery. Which some of them did. I never got it because I only drank stuff out of the bottle or things that I brought myself. They would always make fun of me, Isabella, when I would have my own little case of water and other drinks so that I could have, right? Because I wasn't taking a chance. I had midterms coming up. There was no way I was going to get sick. But now, it's not like that nowadays. When I go to other countries, I partake in the culture. What does that mean?
Try everything.
I try everything. I eat I eat in the street, you know, all the street vendors. I try that. When I was in Puerto Rico, all of my friends in the pharmaceutical world were saying, you need to go to this restaurant. I went to the restaurant, I'm like, this is a tourist hangout. I'm not gonna eat here. I went back to Paloma Park in Puerto Rico, and I sat there, and then I heard some people say, well, let's go, they were talking in Spanish, we're gonna go have dinner, right? I followed them. And where they went, that's where I ate, and it was some of the best food I ever had. I had mofondo, I had tostones, they were delish, right? I also ended up in La Perla in Puerto Rico, which is a place I found out I'm not supposed to be there. And one of the guys was nice to me, he said, what are you doing here? I said, I'm just walking around taking in the sights of Puerto Rico. He said, this is La Perla, you need to go back. And I looked at him and he said, you need to go back. And I understood. And so I went back, and then I asked one of my friends who lives in Puerto Rico, I was in La Perla. He was like, what were you doing down there? I'm like, I was walking. Don't go down there. And it's right next to Old San Juan, right? If you go to Puerto Rico and you go to El Morro, right, the big fort. If you take a wrong turn down there, you'll end up in La Perla, which is what happened to me.
What happened?
What time of night was it when you?
It was about 6 o'clock in the evening.
You think he was trying to do, you're gonna get robbed or?
I was gonna get whooped.
Yes.
Yeah. He was nice to me, he told me to get the hell out. And he was probably like one of the guys whooping people, right?
Maybe I'm very uneducated, but what exactly is wrong about this place? Drug cartel or?
I don't know about
just
drug
a
cartel.
ghetto?
It's a high crime area.
Okay.
All
It's a
cities.
Opportunity to engage in vices.
Opportunity to take Provi's money.
Educated
Yeah, that's
way
what
to
it
say
is.
it.
Referred to as historical shanty town.
Oh, okay. So she just confirmed I was in a shanty town. To me, it wasn't a shanty town. There was nice little houses there. And I just thought, oh, well, look how pretty these houses are. I was walking around, being myself, because that's what I do. I want to be part, huh? I told you, I was just a beautiful one.
It's so gorgeous here.
And then the guy stopped me and said, what are you doing down there? I'm just walking around. He goes, you're in La Perla. You
You're
need
like,
to leave."
where is everybody?
Oh, and by the way, what does La Perla mean?
Pearl.
The pearl. It's a play on words, right? Don't go to the pearl.
I think
you
they're
wait down
doing
there.
like
It's like an
visiting La Perla.
Okay, house is like
They're,
residential.
they're increasing their tourism.
They're trying to increase their La Perla tourism nowadays.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
When I go, Puerto Rico is one of my favorite places to go to. Because within 1 hour, you can go to the mountains, you can go to El Yonke, which is the rainforest. I love the
I
rainforest.
went there.
Oh my God, you go to the rainforest, every 20 minutes it's gonna rain, right? And so you would be sitting there, and the locals who were there, they looked at their clock and they opened their, I'm like, why are they doing this? And then start raining, I'm like, oh, I get it. So, yeah, but they knew exactly when it was gonna rain, because it's cyclic, right? The rainforests are so in tune with nature that every 20 minutes it rains. So did you get rained every 20 minutes? Do you remember?
We did not, and I was extremely hungover, so I would love that. So it was hot and sticky the entire 4-hour hike up this El Yunque.
So, I love Puerto Rico. But the coolest thing, or the funniest thing that ever happened to me, is I was sitting with some Puerto Rican friends, and we were out around the beaches of the Caribbean. It's beautiful down there. And I heard this.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, dude, somebody's whistling this. And they were all laughing at me. He said, go over there. And I got closer and it got louder. And it was right there in the plant. I'm like, somebody's in there? He said, it's the frog. It's a coquille. The coquille is like this really little tiny frog that makes a
They're
big
so
noise.
cute.
Makes a big noise. Right.
Cicadas, oh, they're so loud.
Yeah, no, it's not a cicada.
Louder than that?
Yeah, louder. And then they said, well, let's go into the ocean. Right on the Caribbean side, we got in there, and the dinoflagellates were in there, and they splashed water at me, and everything phosphoresced. I mean, it just was beautiful. There was water flying up in the air that was all fluorescent, because all the algae in there were phosphorescent. And then about the time I turned around and there was a big old shark over there we saw because the water phosphoresced. And they said, let's get out now. I'm like, you damn right, we're getting out of here right now. I don't want to be dinner. So I had so much fun down there, and I want to go back. We just haven't been back. But you know, the big hurricane hit there. And like every time I'm about to go back, there's a big hurricane, and my friends will tell me, just don't come down here. There's not much to do, except work. I said, well, I'll come and help. No, we don't want you here because you take too many breaks. Well, you know, I work like an hour, then I gotta have coffee, and you know, I gotta have all that. You know, so they don't like it, but they take too many breaks. This is an amoeba that can cause an infection of the eye. This is a amoeba, and also there's another one called Naglaria. These remember I told you, Profi's rules of water are: number one, if the water's not moving, stay the hell out. Number two, if it rains, wait a day, then get in. And this is for natural bodies, not swimming pools. And the third one is if the water is 80 degrees warmer, do not get in it because the amoeba like warm water, right? And so this is a case where a lady jumped into a very warm body of water fed by reservoir, and had contacts in and left her contacts in and then went to sleep, and the amoeba got underneath the contacts, and they digested her eye. So when she woke up in the middle of the night in pain, and
My first question is, why does she sleep in contacts?
I have no idea.
Rule number one.
There's this video going around of this person who would sleep in them, and then I guess just assumed that they fell out in the night. And the eye doctor like made him like look down. There's like 4 contacts built up in the eye.
And the contacts eventually, if you keep them there long enough, they'll start developing protein coverings on them.
Yeah, they get hard, right?
And so then when you remove them, it tears the lens of the cornea. So it's silly.
So
I
she
don't.
blind or no?
Huh?
Is
She died.
blind? Huh?
She died.
She
Oh,
died?
she died from that?
Oh.
The organisms went. So this here,
Oh my God.
this
That's sleeping in context.
this here is called the triangle of concern by me. Other people, like Dr. Oz, will call this a triangle of death. If you have an infection anywhere here, it can move back to the brain and then cause problems.
That's why you go to the dentist.
Yeah, and so here, this is Acanthamoeba naglaria. If you look them up, they'll always talk about, not about the eye, but they'll always talk about them getting into the nerves, getting through the blood-brain barrier, and then causing encephalitis. And that's what happened with this young lady. As she had the infection of the eye, she also had the amoeba moved into the brain. And while they were worried about the eye, the amoeba in the brain took over and died. She died.
I just love the contrast of photos, like kids happily.
Well, so I put this here. I put this
Yeah,
here.
that's
Well, she died.
I put this here because little kids don't know any better. So as parents, we need to be sure that and I don't want to be overly protective of kiddos.
No, they'll drink the water. My
Splash
kid,
around in
She
it.
thinks it's hilarious
Yeah.
to like drink it
Yeah.
and then.
Yeah.
And so then people get sick. We have to be careful. Okay? If you follow the 3 rules of water, Samantha, you're gonna live a very long and happy life. At least, yeah. At least you're not gonna get infected by amoeba, right?
Why don't go swimming after it rains?
Because what happens, everything that was on the land gets put into the river basin. And there's a million things that can hurt you.
I need like a diagram that says triangle of death.
But why
So I have to
only
put it
one
up
day?
now.
What?
Why only one day?
That's enough time, especially if a river's moving, that all of the stuff, all the debris settles to the bottom or it gets moved downstream. Yep.
Is it more dangerous for a pregnant person to swim in the good conditions of water? Cause I went to Kerrville and we got in the river and everybody was like, what are you doing?
No.
You know?
I don't have a problem with pregnant women getting into a water as long as the water's clean.
Yeah,
If the water's not moving, don't get in it.
it was moving
Right.
and it was cool. and
Yeah, I had
the river.
an ex-student call me last year and tell me, Pravi, my daughter and I are both having really bad discharges coming out of our vagina. I'm like, why are you telling me this?
How you been?
She said, she said, because I know you know a lot about these things, and we were in the green belt and we were in the water, and I said, was the water moving? She said, no.
Ew.
I said, well, you need to go get checked out.
Oh.
And they had a little pathogen called capnocytophagia, which is a lot of times associated with stagnant water and a bunch of other things. But it cleared up like that once they took antibiotics. But again, if you followed my rules, and she knew the rules, if you would have followed my rules, you would not have got into that. I had another student who I saw like 2 years later, and he said, I want to show you something. He looked at his shirt, and there was a big scar right here that had been sutured up. He was cleaning the green belt, and he got into a body of water, and he didn't know, but he hit a piece of metal that was there and it cut him, and he got necrotizing fasciitis. So all of his side was destroyed, and they had to stop the infection, debride it, and then they sutured him back together. But you could see where the damage was.
I want like a list, like a detailed list of all of this, so I can give it to my husband.
Jen,
So I'm a big fan of Lake Georgetown. and
good for
I'm-
you.
Well, are you being sarcastic right now?
No,
I take my dog there.
No,
I
it's
take
good.
it serious
It's good.
right now.
That's way far from here.
Yeah, but it's super worth it. The water is super clean, and that was definitely a water source where I felt comfortable.
I like
in.
George.
But my
Lake
question
George.
though is though, like, I mean, I would not say it's considered a stagnant.
It's low right now because we haven't got any rain.
Yeah, but like, when do you really consider something having flow, and when is it really stagnant?
My rule is I take a leaf and I throw the leaf in the water, and if the leaf moves, I'm good.
What if it moves just a little?
I wouldn't get it. But that's me. I like my life. Okay? Other people wouldn't get it.
Well, cause like, obviously there's like,
But getting in the water, like walking with your feet, that's different than.
we were like,
Yeah.
we all just got in and we were swimming around that good stuff, but like, I'm just kinda wondering, 'cause obviously the waves come from like the jet skis and boats and whatnot, where.
I'm not worried about that kind of waste. I'm worried about poop. Yes, it is very safe. Except, with the Blanco River, she asked, is the Blanco River safe? Yes, it is, except the Blanco River about 3 years ago had a big algal bloom because there was a certain city, I'm not gonna mention any names, Dripping Springs, who was putting all of their raw sewage into the river. Yeah.
That's gross, sorry, but, one of my
have never asked
friends
myself
was
if I
at
should get
a
out of
river,
that.
or at the, I don't know, have you heard of Richland Chambers Lake? It's out kind of up north by Dallas, but they had gone and they had all these scabs and like, it looked like carpet burn, where it's like shiny. Do you know what that could be from? Like, cause I was supposed to take our dogs up there to help them clean, and I was like, I don't wanna bring the dogs in case they
No, I
jump
don't
in the
know
lake.
what that was. No,
I've
but,
actually had scabies, it's not scabies.
so scabies is more
Like a bug in
pustule
your-
looking, itchy, scaly thing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean,
this
do you have
is like-
pictures?
I
Show it to me later.
Actually might, yeah, let me
Okay,
ask.
show me.
I know my daughter had some kind of infection from the river when she was younger. It was just like a very it was all over her legs, like all the way to about here, like
Mhm.
where her shorts would go to, it was below that. And it was just very it was just on the top layer of skin, and the doctor just told us,
So I don't know if you remember this, how many people go to ACL? Anybody? if you go to ACL, about 12 years ago, during ACL, there was this big rainstorm.
Oh, yeah,
but
everyone
You remember
was
this
like
one?
sliding
People were
through.
sliding in the dirt,
In the mud, in the
It
mud.
was not mud. though.
Well, whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
It was, yeah, because they had put down all this stuff, right? And then people started developing this really weird rash. Are you with me?
Yeah.
And they were like, Provi, look at this. I'm like, don't show me that. And what it was, they said, do you think it's a bacterial infection? I'm like, no, that looks like poison ivy. That's what it was. There was poison ivy out there, and people were taking shortcuts through kind of the woods
Oh, there's
because there
all
was so
over.
much mud and stuff, and they didn't know what poison ivy looked like. They were getting it all over them.
No, that's what they get.
It's actually all over those trails. I used to take my dog out there a lot and we always found
Where's
it.
ACL at?
It's down on Auditorium Shores.
Oh.
I mean, now it's all over the city, but most of it, the big part of it is Auditorium Shores. It's really interesting the kind of things you run into. Just, you know, when people come up and say, "Look at this," I'm like,
So I can't believe your student emailed you and asked who approached her and her daughter's vagina, though.
The district.
Wow.
Well, she didn't say vagina until I called her because I said, "What's going on?"
Oh.
She said we have a really bad exudate. I'm like, oh. Yeah. Okay, so
Preaching it to be around.
let's stop. Let's see. Oh no, I have till what?
11:50.
11:50. Okay, we have plenty of time. So if we look at the cilia, the Psilophora, if we look at them, right, a lot of these things are in symbiotic relationships with other organisms, but they don't really hurt anybody. So did you know that termites can ingest wood, but they cannot digest it?
So what do
Oh,
they
it's
do?
so weird.
So the bacteria and the ciliates that are in their intestinal tract digest the wood, and then everybody partakes in the sugar. So it's a symbiotic, it's a mutualistic relationship between the
Huh.
bacteria, the ciliates, and the termite. Isn't that cool?
So a termite would be an example of this?
No,
No.
the cilia in it would be.
Oh, the cilia.
And so there are many different ones. Here's a couple of them. Look at them. So this is a paramecium stentor. Look at how beautiful they are. You can see the cilia, right? But there's one organism that can cause dysentery, and that's Valentinium coli, and it looks like this, right? And if you ingest the cyst, you can come down with dysentery. But it's pretty rare, right? Most of the organisms in the ciliate group in the Psilophora are not problematic for us. Okay, yes, sir. You gonna write it? Yes. Yes. So Psilophora, they're put in that group because they're ciliated, they have cilia. Okay? All right, the bad boy of the group, which we'll spend a little time on, are the apicomplexa. The apicomplexa are not motile, and so they rely on the fluid matrices that they infect. So you're gonna find them in the blood, in the CSF, you're gonna find them in the vitreous humor of the eyes, those kinds of places, right? And so if we think about them, then there's some really bad boys in this group. Here are the different stages of the malaria parasite. Look at them. There's a whole bunch of them. Right? Now, I'm not going to expect you to know every single state, but I will show you. I will show you the life cycle of this in a minute. So, the apicomyplexa, a lot of times, or sometimes referred to commonly as the sporozoans, and the reason they're called sporozoans is because they produce spores. Okay. And so here is the malaria parasite. Here's that very famous article, or that very famous image. But there is the culprit for malaria. If it wasn't for the female Anopheline mosquito, malaria would not cause problems.
Only female mosquitoes.
Only female mosquitoes.
Only that species.
Yeah. So if you're in the backyard, Jen, or over in Lake Georgetown, and you hear these things and you try to swat at it, that's the male trying to get your attention. So that the female.
Does that touch every mosquito?
Yeah, they're pretty smart.
So the males are the ones that are
making noise,
Oh, I never knew that.
but the female are the silent assassins.
And
They're the
always
ones that
get
land
me.
on you and
Yeah.
take the blood meal. So if you swat at one, there's others around.
What is your best anti mosquito?
Citronella works.
Just the candles?
Yeah, we do, I gotta be honest with you, the mosquitoes have been so bad in our backyard lately that we had to buy DEET. And I usually do not use that stuff,
I'm allergic to DEET.
but we
It's like
couldn't
a
do
mosquito
any
spray.
DEET. We couldn't work in the yard because there was so many mosquitoes.
Yeah.
It's like
Kinda
after
what
that
we're
big
facing
rain,
right
they
now.
just,
But it hasn't rained in a long time, and so they're everywhere. And
they're starting to get lesser
What's
at
up
my
with that?
house, but I
Huh?
know.
Why? It's like, it's been so
I
dry.
don't know.
Why are there so many
I don't
mosquitoes
know.
so bright?
Except I do know one thing, and my wife's hypothesis is the next door neighbor, their pool hasn't been serviced in over 3 months. So we think that's the major source.
One of our neighbors has a fountain and I really wanna ask them to get rid of it, cause it's just so much mosquitoes.
But my neighbor, can't find anybody to clean his pool.
Oh.
Because it's way far gone, and nobody wants to touch it, because it's gonna cost a lot of money to clean it. I mean, it's so green and nasty that the egrets are now hanging out there. They think it's like a pond,
Oh my gosh.
right? So I heard the egret last night. The hell is that? I looked over there it was,
Bird.
eating
Maybe he's trying to
frogs.
help with the frog population.
Yeah,
It's a lot with the birds that used to fly around cows.
cowbirds.
Yeah, the white ones. We have them a lot. I know we treat our tanks.
Would that work?
A mosquito what?
Mosquito bits?
Oh, yeah, the little dunks, is that what you're talking
The
about?
mosquito bits, they're like little, they look like little granola balls. Mosquito bits. You put it
So we
into
call
the-
them dunks,
Okay,
and we put them in our bird bath,
yeah.
Oh.
and it has Bacillus thuringiensis in it.
Mhm.
And the mosquitoes, the darters, the little larvae will eat them, and it'll clog their intestinal tract and they'll die, and you won't have mosquitoes.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
what we put in our tanks.
Yeah, you can put them on tanks too. They don't hurt,
They're safe
they
for
don't
the
hurt humans or
animals.
other animals, just the
Can you
mosquitoes.
say that again? What is it?
A mosquito dunk? Look,
Like a
type it in
thing.
there. What do you call it, a biscuit?
Mosquito bits,
Bits.
B-I-T-S.
Now, I've never heard of that and called that way. We call them
Can it only
dunks.
go in water?
Yeah, so
Can it
it's,
go
it's,
in, like-
it's specifically for.
She's gonna buy them, go throw in the fountain.
Yeah.
No, really, it's specifically for mosquitoes. However, you can buy BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, as a solution. I used to make my own. I would just grow it, mix it in with a little bit of physiological saline, and I would spray the trees, and then the caterpillars would eat it, and then they would die. I don't do that anymore because I want the butterflies and the moths to survive, so I don't do it anymore. Yep.
So, but isn't it that, technically mosquitoes like stay underneath the leaf, like the bottom of the leaf?
They
as
can.
protection?
So there are 3 big species, or three big genera of mosquitoes in Texas. I'm gonna talk about them in a little bit.
That sounds horrible, but, no, seriously, they're like so bad right now, but like, what we were thinking about was spraying the entire grass area, but as soon as you water your grass or lawn, it doesn't work anymore, is that correct? Like if we were to spray,
Correct.
so, and we.
I'm not recommending you spray anything on your lawn. So you know the people who come around like Mosquito Coast and those people, they'll tell you, oh, we're not using chemicals, we're using a plant derivative. It's a chemical. And when they spray it, it's broad spectrum, it's gonna kill everything. So I always ask them to leave and they're like, why? I mean, why won't you at least talk to us? I'm like, because you're using chemicals. We're not using chemicals, we're using a plant-based agent, it's a chemical. It's broad. I said, are you telling me your particular insecticide, it's not an insecticide, I said, are you telling me your plant-based thing is not broad spectrum? Oh, we don't know, I don't know what that means. So they've been trained to only tell you one story, they can't answer anything else. I said, please leave. Oh, your neighbor down the street is, they always say, your neighbor down the street is very, I said, which neighbor? Tell me their names and I'll go talk to them, and then they can't tell me. Yep.
Yeah, but realistically, like, what can we do? Because there is about 5 citronella candles around us. I'm covered in spray. I mean, the dog is getting eaten
There's
alive.
not much
I'm
you
getting
can, there's
eaten
not much you
alive.
can do.
So
I'm
what
sorry.
that's right.
There's not much you can
It's
do.
hoping for
The mosquitoes have now come into our house, and my wife has put little fly traps down for them, and she's caught 3 of them. I'm like, hon, they're not heavy enough to get stuck in that stuff. She goes, I'm trying anything now. She bought these little, there's these little cute little lights.
Oh, I have seen those.
Oh, that
that
attract
emit a
them.
little blue light, and the mosquitoes are attracted, and when they get in there, it shocks them and they die. You might try that.
About this size.
Okay.
They do have them pretty big.
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that. The only thing that we did try that was kind of successful was just having the fire and like the smoke around us.
Also fans. Fans
Yeah.
circulate,
Yeah, we did
keep
that too.
flies and mosquitoes away.
What we have decided to do is we are going to enclose our porch.
Yeah.
Because our porch looks out over the creek, and we
Mm.
can't sit out there because the mosquitoes kill us.
Yeah.
So we're gonna enclose it, and then we can enjoy it.
Aren't some herbs like noxious to the mosquitoes? Like,
Some
There's
people
things you can
believe,
plant.
although I cannot validate this, some people believe if you rub onion on you, that they won't come
I
near
would
you.
rather mosquitoes.
The problem with that is what? You smell like onion, yeah.
delicious.
Mosquitoes, they hate bubbles, so I usually just do my little bubble machine with my little brother.
I didn't know they hate
Oh,
bubbles.
that's such a good idea.
But yeah, they hate bubbles.
Oh, here's another thing you can do for your bird bath, is you can put a drop of Dawn in it.
Not mine, but my neighbor's.
Whatever.
Good
You
ideas.
put a drop of Dawn in it, and when the mosquitoes land to lay their eggs, the surface tension is different and they fall through it and drown.
That is a good idea.
But the problem is that you'll kill bees too.
Oh.
I keep apple cider vinegar with Dawn in it on my porch and it kills all the flies.
Eric, did you have a question?
No,
You just stretched.
the resting is our.
So we'll talk about the life cycle in just a minute. Let's talk about Toxoplasma gondii. How many are you aware of it? So Toxoplasma gondii is, for us, it's normally found with cats. Cats are natural hunters, and when they go out and hunt something, a lot of times that particular thing they kill, birds or mice or rats or whatever, have the parasite in them, Toxoplasma gondii. So the cat becomes a reservoir. And the Toxoplasma gondii is excreted or shed in the feces. And so every time a cat poos, they release a little bit of the cyst, the oocyst into the poo. And so if you're a pregnant female, you should never clean the kitty litter because you can come down with toxoplasmosis. And in very, very, very rare cases, it can lead to the loss of the developing fetus.
That's what I always wondered what was behind that, because we made our cat an outside cat when I was pregnant. Because my husband read an article about like saying like when you clean a litter box, it can cause you to have
It's
miscarriage.
very interesting to me that Toxoplasma gondii is causing blindness in a lot of immunocompromised people. And that's more prevalent, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about the very, very rare case of a pregnant female coming down with an infection of toxoplasmosis and losing a fetus. I get it, it's really important that we educate females about that, but what about the individuals who are developing eye infections and are going blind because of it? Should we do something for them also?
Litter box is-
Yeah, so again, ladies, if you are with child, the other person in the relationship isn't doing as much work as you are for 9 months, have them clean out the litter box. However, you need to instruct them about how to clean it out properly. Because if you just tell them, hun, will you clean out the litter box, they will be like the average male and they'll pick up the litter box tram and they'll go outside and they'll just gonna go extra fertilizer for the yard, right? And that's just spreading out the organism into the yard. Any poo from you're laughing. Any poo from kitties need to be treated like regular waste. So pick it up, I always kinda take my hand, I put a bag on it, I go in there, I pick up all the poo. My wife has a little scooper, I'm like, I'm not gonna use that thing. So I pick them up, I wrap them up and I tie them up and then I throw that in regular. So anyway, go ahead, you
I
gotta
was
tell.
gonna say, I did that. I used to live in like a not great part of San Francisco with my sisters, and we were driving, going on a trip, and I asked my fiance, and I was like, can you go clean out the cat's litter? and he just took it, and we lived in like an alley, and he just threw the whole box of litter into the street, and I'm like, oh my god, the cat doesn't have any more litter, and now there's just crap all over the street, which wasn't that weird. But I was like, this is just so much. And then we ended up driving the cat with no litter just to try and get out of the city to get to a store. And she pooped and peed all over the car. Guys are idiots, though. Literally tossed it. I was like, what? Do you think this is what I do every day?
We're not idiots. We just need to be trained.
He just didn't even ask questions.
Did you marry
He
this
just-
guy?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
He cleans litter and he knows how to do it.
She's like, he's trained now.
He didn't even ask a question. He's like, I got it. And it's like, you
Do you have
see
kiddos?
someone? Do I have what?
You have a kiddo?
Mm-mm. Yeah, not yet.
Just so you know, Christian and Eric, you know this already. Males do not mature until they're 50.
You're
They don't.
Still waiting.
And as a matter of fact, some of us in our 50s still think we can do things that we did in our 20s.
When you have kids, you have to retrain.
Yeah.
My husband offered our 3-year-old cookies for breakfast this morning. I was like, do you think that's great? Do you think that's healthy? I've been playing like health videos for my baby.
Yeah.
And like it teaches her like what to eat, what not to eat, stuff like that. So she looked at them and she said, that's not healthy, that's junk food. And I was
Aw.
like, there you go. She knows more than my 24-year-old husband.
All right. So the other one is Cryptosporidium parvum. Cryptosporidium is in the water, and it has become resistant to bleach. So the one thing we always had to fight this now doesn't work as great, right? So we've had major outbreaks of Cryptosporidium in San Antonio and in Cedar Park, because every once in a while, construction workers will be working on projects and they'll break the water line and the sewage line at the same time, and they'll be mixing. So when you have a boil notice, it's really about this
Oh,
organism.
really? Do those
It's
all the
really
time.
about this organism. Why do you have them all the time? Where do you live?
Austin. I mean, I've never had water issues anywhere before I lived in Austin.
I've not had a boil notice here at all. Corpus Christi, whole different ballgame.
After the winter.
Yeah,
whatever.
winter storm.
Oh,
I was
okay,
boiling
yeah,
water
but-
for
but that
a
was an
week.
ano-
The
that was an
zebra mussel
anomaly.
things.
So that whole, whatever his name was,
Too.
that Snowmageddon or whatever,
Mhm.
that was an anomaly. I mean, that doesn't happen here, right? But, you know, my wife and I, we were collecting water off of the roof used to flush
Oh,
toilets.
I tapped into the apartment pool. I was knocking snow off of people's cars.
Well, the creek was running and I was gonna go back there and collect water. She goes, why do that? We can just collect it off the roof. I'm like, and that's why I married you, because you're a lot smarter than I am. We collect big,
Forgot so many people.
big old trash cans of water from the roof, and we use that to flush.
When we have these boil water notices, I know they always send out, I swear I've had like 4 since I've lived in Austin, but is it safe to let the water, obviously I don't feel comfortable washing dishes with that water. Like, is it okay to like leave the water and let it cool and then it's fine?
Yeah.
Or?
Yep.
I'm always just
You
like boil it and use the
you
water
sanitize
right
the water.
after.
My wife is like that also. She's a scientist. And she says, why are you washing your clothes? I'm like, because my clothes are dirty, I need to wash them. She goes, there's a boil notice. I'm like, that's not gonna affect the clothes. I said, it's got soap in it, it's a surfactant, it's not gonna be a problem. She said, well, then why don't you wash the dishes then? I'm like, well, because that's different, that comes in contact with our food.
And I go, so did your clothes. I know, like, right now, we have an issue with our water or something, our well, our electric pump is messed up, so we had to switch it to the other well, and the line hasn't been used
You're just
in
lucky
so
you have 2
long.
wells.
Well, we have multiple houses on the property,
Okay.
so there's multiple wells,
Okay.
but thank God we're connected to the other one still.
Which
They almost cut the line
aquifer do you
off.
feed into?
I honestly don't, I know my husband does.
Where are you?
In Lockhart, south of Lockhart.
You're probably in the Edwards aquifer.
I think that sounds familiar, yeah, my husband knows, but we had to switch, and so like yesterday, when our water came back on, I spent like 2 hours, I mean, this was late, I was up to like 3, boiling like gallons and gallons of water, and like, it's just sitting in my house now, cause my daughter needs a bath.
Once you boil, the water is safe to use.
Yeah, and you can just leave
But I
it.
would use it sparingly.
Yeah.
I wouldn't decide to all of a sudden make soup. Right? It's just different. So this is the oocyst, and here are the trophozoites coming out of the oocyst. Look at that. They look scary, right? This is the apical complex. It's the stuff that penetrates the cells. Isn't that cool? The way these things are having all over here. Okay. Very complicated life cycle. Why do they have a complicated life cycle, Eric?
It's harder to kill.
Hard to kill.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the dinoflagellates. And so the dinoflagellates here they are. This is what it looks like, right? And this is Carinia. It's beautiful. Yeah. So anybody ever heard of diatomaceous earth? Who's had a
Yeah.
diatomaceous earth will kill fleas and all kinds of different things.
Oh, yeah, that powder.
Around your house. That's what it is. It's the skeletons of these things. Look at the silica that's in there. And so these things are sharp, and when the fleas crawl through it, it cuts them up and they die. And it's a really great way to control fleas and ants and things like that without using herbicides or
Safe for
insecticides.
animals.
And it's safe for,
You can get it
You
at
can buy it at Walmart.
Depot.
Wow.
We had really bad.
Diatomaceous earth.
Diets and niches.
And so here's like, I put this down there because remember I told you I was in the Caribbean, everything was phosphorescing. These are the dinoflagellates. Here you can see how they're related phylogenetically, right? Here's the ciliates, here's the apical myplexans, and off of the apical, here's the dinoflagellates here, right? And so if we think about them, unfortunately, some of the parts off the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi, are vastly without oxygen, right? And so they are hypoxic. And so lots of organisms can't even live in those areas anymore, and that's really sad.
Where?
Off the coast of Louisiana, Mississippi,
Why?
because of all the nutrients that come down the Mississippi River.
Oh, I see.
They
We talked
feed,
about
the
this.
nutrients
Yeah.
feed the algae take all the oxygen out of the water, and then essentially it becomes a dead zone. Okay? So here you can see an algal bloom over here on the seaside, but on the bay side, not so much, right? They're separated, right? And then here you can see an algal bloom. This is what a red tide looks like. It can be scary. If you don't know what you're looking at, lots of people there was a big red tide in some of the oceans, and people were saying it's the end of the world, all kinds of different things. People say a whole bunch of different things about it. But the thing about Carinia is it kills everything because they cannot take any dissolved oxygen from the environment, and they die. And in the shellfish, the toxins that they produce, the zaxatoxin they produce, biomagnify. I no longer eat raw oysters because I grew up in the coast, I grew up in Corpus, I would go fishing. Lunch for me would be taking raw oysters and eating them right off the jetties. But I don't do that anymore because the waters are so polluted, I'm not taking a chance. I cook oysters, fry them, put them in roux, saute them, and I'll eat them that way, but that breaks all the toxin. Okay, yep.
What about cold weather oysters? Like
Those are better, and I would eat oysters coming from Maine or places like that. I would for sure.
delicious.
Okay? Yeah. But not from the Galveston Bay area, right?
I wouldn't eat anything that comes out of the Galveston Bay. That place is nasty.
All right, so here you can see, here's the toxin itself, the molecule of toxin. It's called zaxatoxin. It is a neurotoxin. It causes paralytic shellfish poisoning, and so it can shut down your nervous system, right, completely. So we have to be very careful with that. I like to mitigate risk, and so part of the mitigation of that risk is I no longer eat raw oysters, and that's a shame because I like them, right? But I'm not going to do it if there's a chance I'm going to get sick, because the toxin itself can be in your body. It's a biological toxin. It will degrade over time. The problem is how much did you get, and will it degrade, and you won't have any negative impacts in your life, right? And I wouldn't take that chance, Eric. I'm getting close to retirement. I want to be able to enjoy retirement, okay? So let's talk about the malaria life cycle. So there are two parts of malaria life cycle. One of them occurs in the mosquito, that's the sexual cycle. The other occurs in the human, that's the asexual cycle. It's a cycle, it can happen anywhere. So this is the life cycle I need you to know for the exam. And so we just start somewhere, right? A zygote is produced, it has the sporozoites, those are the sex cells, those are the diploid cells, if you will, the sexual entity, the uniqueness of the malaria parasite. The zygote releases those sporozoites, the sporozoites migrate to the salivary glands. In the salivary glands, a mosquito takes a blood meal, and when it takes a blood meal, it injects a little bit of a heparin-like substance that allows for the flow of the blood not to clot in the proboscis, right? The proboscis is that pointy thing that they use to take the blood, yes? So once the sporozoites get into the bloodstream, they migrate to the liver, and in the liver they mature and they become merozoites. The merozoites are what causes the infection in humans, right? So merozoites infect red blood cells, produce more merozoites, they get released. The merozoites continuously infect red blood cells, they get released, and that cycle continues. That's what causes the signs and symptoms of malaria. The bed shaking chills, the high fever, all that stuff that's related with malaria, right? If you want to watch a good movie about malaria, the movie is named Mary and Martha. It really shows what happens when you get malaria, okay? So eventually, some of those merozoites will specialize and become male and female gametocytes. These are like the haploid cells, if you will. And so another mosquito has to take a blood meal from you, and they have to ingest both the male and the female gametocyte, because once those male and female gametocytes get into the lumen, the intestines of the mosquito, they fuse, and it's like they're undergoing sex. They fuse, and they form a zygote, right? And so the zygote itself produces more sporozoites, and then the sporozoites start all over again, right? So this a lot of times is known as an alternation of generations, because the life cycle is so complicated that each generation is producing the next. And so it's this cycle is continuous, very complicated. And so as long as one part of the life cycle is going on, you can always have the life cycle continue. So for us, for humans, we tend to do two things. We destroy the mosquito or we treat the patient, right? But we never do both because it's too expensive, okay? What did you say about malaria in Vietnam, Tran, the other day?
Oh yeah, it is so common that like even in elementary school we had like lessons to like take and like to be alert of mosquitoes around us, and we also like learn about like how females like they don't make sounds but like the males do and all that, because it's like so common that we have to be like educated.
Yeah, but now think about us as United States citizens. We've never been educated about malaria. And it was here before. In the 50s, it was in Florida, it was in Louisiana, and it was in Houston. We got rid of it because we used DDT to get rid of it, which is not a good chemical. DDT has been outlawed in the United States, but there's so much of it, certain chemical companies have so much of it that they made a special law for them so they could export DDT to other countries and sell it to them. Guess what happens? That stuff comes back to us in produce. Wash. Okay? Any questions? So if you wanted to, this is a very complicated life cycle, and in order to get through it, you would have to attack all parts of the life cycle. You just couldn't do one. The other thing to think about is there is a evolutionary mutation that has occurred in peoples in places where malaria is endemic. Malaria is found all the time. That particular mutation is called sickle cell. How many people have heard of that?
Oh, yeah.
So we will start talking next time about sickle cell. Sickle cell makes the shape of the red blood cell a little bit different, but the malaria parasite doesn't recognize that sickle-shaped red blood cell as infectable. Therefore, people who carry the trait or people who have the phenotype of sickle cell never get malaria.
Is that where it makes it like kind of
Moon shape.
jagged?
But the problem is sickle cell is worse than malaria. So, evolution doesn't get it right all the time. There is now 3 clinical trials going on with people using CRISPR technology to fix sickle cell, and we know that 2 of those trials have been positive, have worked. A third is ongoing. So we had an individual who wrote a little bit about doxycycline and its effects on malaria, and I told that individual that I would give 2 points to everybody in the classroom if he just said a little bit about what he found out. And so he's going to present very quickly.
Okay.
And then everybody will get 2 points on examining clue number 2, so that'll be a total of 5. 5 points added. So if you get a 94, I'll tack on 5, you get a 95. Okay? All right, go.
ProView is interested in, when I said I took doxycycline prophylactically before I went down to Haiti, he's like, how did that work? I didn't think it would.